Imagine you have a client, right? Let's just call her Lori. And every single time you put this, like, yellow math worksheet on her desk, she just loses it, starts screaming, tearing the paper, throwing pencils everywhere.
Which is, a pretty common scenario.
Exactly. And a lot of people are taught to just, well, ignore attention-seeking behavior. So you turn your back, you walk over to your desk, and you just wait for her to calm down. But the real question is, did you just use extinction to stop that screaming, or did you accidentally guarantee she's going to scream even louder tomorrow?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar clinical question right there.
Yeah.
And, spoiler alert, based on the data we have, you probably just made the behavior much, much stronger.
Wow. Okay, so welcome to this deep dive into the exact mechanics of making a behavior disappear. If you're an aspiring BCBA and you're just up to your ears in exam prep, you know this as domain B11.
Right.
But we aren't going to just sit here and read definitions from a syllabus today. We're going straight to the biological and, the environmental machinery behind operant and respondent extinction.
And to do that, we are pulling from a pretty heavy stack of source material today. We're synthesizing exams 1 through 3, from the BIS mock exams, the BIS 6th edition study guide, some really great translated excerpts from the Cooper, Heron, and Heward text, and an ethics and ABA workbook.
There's a lot to get through.
It is. But our goal is to dissect the real-world application of these concepts so you can walk into that exam room, and into your actual clinical practice, just seeing the underlying matrix of human behavior.
I love that. So let's stick with Lori and her math worksheet to kind of anchor this. Before we can even talk about how to extinguish her screaming, we really have to look at how that behavior was built in the first place, right?
Right, absolutely.
And from my understanding of the sources, there are actually 2 completely different types of learning happening at the exact same time when Lori sees that math worksheet.
Yeah, and that is a crucial distinction for you to grasp. We are looking at operant conditioning and respondent conditioning. And let's just look at the operant side first. So operant behavior is all about consequences. An organism operates on its environment to get a specific result. Lori screams and throws her pencils because, in the past, doing so resulted in the therapist walking away.
She successfully escaped the math worksheet.
Exactly. Her behavior was emitted, and it was reinforced by that escape. It's a choice, essentially, driven by past results.
Wait, let me stop you there, though. Because when Lori sees that yellow worksheet, she isn't just throwing pencils. Like, she is visibly sweating. Her face gets flushed, her breathing gets shallow, her heart rate spikes.
Yeah, physical symptoms.
Right. So is she, operating on her environment to make her heart beat faster so she can escape the math? That doesn't make sense.
Not at all.
No.
And that right there is the respondent side of the equation. Respondent behavior is reflexive. It's elicited purely by an antecedent stimulus.
The thing that happens before the behavior?
Yes. In respondent conditioning, the environment actually controls the organism. Lori's biology is reacting to a trigger. A long time ago, a really difficult task caused her genuine physiological stress, which is an unconditioned response.
Okay, so just a natural physical reaction.
Right. But over time, simply the visual of the yellow paper, the conditioned stimulus, became paired with that stress. Now, just seeing the paper forces her nervous system to react. She isn't choosing to sweat, right? Her biology is just doing it for her.
Okay, I want to use an example straight from the study guide because this really helped me. They use this garage door analogy.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, so if you usually hear your garage door open at 3:15 p.m. every day, you feel calm. It's just your family coming home. But if you hear it randomly at 1 a.m., you instantly feel alarmed. Your heart pounds.
Right, you aren't choosing to be alarmed.
Exactly. That's respondent. The environment triggered it. But if, on the operant side, your child puts their toys away and you give them a hug, which is reinforcement, so they clean up more often, that's operant. They are operating on the environment to get the hug.
That is a perfect breakdown.
Well said.
But for the exam, you have to remember that in real life, these 2 constantly interact, like the pajamas example.
Oh, the pajamas. Yes, explain that one.
So putting on pajamas is a neutral stimulus, right? But it gets paired with sleep, the unconditioned stimulus, every single night. Eventually, putting on the pajamas actually makes you feel physically exhausted just by wearing them.
Which is the respondent part.
Exactly. But the act of actually getting into bed to escape that gross feeling of being tired, that's operant. That's negative reinforcement.
So operant is the action taken to get a result, like screaming to escape or getting into bed. And respondent is the biological reflex triggered by the environment, like the sweating or feeling sleepy.
You've got it. The organism operates to get a consequence, but the environment elicits the reflex. And for your practice, you have to be able to tease apart these interacting layers.
Because if you want to eliminate the behaviors, you have to use completely different tools.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's look at those tools. Let's say we want to stop Lori's operant screaming. How do we break a behavior that is built entirely on consequences?
We use operant extinction. The mechanical definition of operant extinction is when a previously reinforced behavior is no longer reinforced.
Meaning the payoff is gone.
Yes. The specific consequence that has been maintaining the behavior is completely withheld. Over time, the response rate decreases until the behavior ceases, like a lab rat that presses a lever to get food.
Right.
If you stop dispensing the food, eventually the rat just stops pressing the lever.
Okay, I want to circle back to my opening scenario, though, because this feels like a massive trap for students. I always thought if a kid throws a tantrum, you just turn your back, ignore them, and boom, that's extinction. Are you saying that turning my back on Lori is actually making it worse?
I am. Assuming that ignoring is just synonymous with extinction is perhaps the single most common mistake students make on the BCBA exam.
Wait, really? The most common.
Absolutely. Extinction is not a blanket action you perform, like ignoring someone. Extinction is the deliberate severing of a specific contingency. You always have to ask, what is the function of the behavior?
Okay, so Lori's function is escape. She screams, so you will take the math away.
Right. So if you turn your back and walk to your desk, you just allowed her to escape the math task. You didn't extinguish the behavior. You actively reinforced it.
Oh, wow. So for Lori, extinction means she absolutely does not get to escape. I would need to keep that math worksheet right in front of her, keep the demand placed, and ensure that her screaming no longer produces the result of me walking away.
Precisely. The behavior happens, but the payoff does not. Now let's contrast Lori with another case study from the sources. There's a boy named Emmett.
Oh, right, the milk gurgling.
Yes. Emmett gurgles his milk at the dinner table, and it's incredibly loud. Every time he does it, his dad stops eating, turns to him, and explains why he needs to use his manners. But the gurgling just keeps increasing.
Because the dad thinks he's providing a punishment by scolding him, right? But he's actually providing the exact consequence Emmett wants, which is attention.
Yes, Emmett's behavior is maintained by attention. So in Emmett's case, if the dad decides to completely ignore the milk gurgling, no eye contact, no scolding, no signs of frustration, that actually would be operant extinction.
Because the specific maintaining reinforcer, the attention, is being withheld, so ignoring is only extinction if the function of the behavior is attention. That is such a massive distinction.
It really is.
And speaking of exam traps, there is a really tricky scenario in the BAS mock exams about a client named Kyle.
Oh, the nail-biting case.
Yeah, so Kyle has a severe nail-biting habit, and the BCBA determines the behavior is maintained by automatic sensory reinforcement. Like the physical sensation just simply feels good to him.
Right.
So to stop it, the BCBA puts these thick, heavy winter gloves on Kyle's hands so he physically cannot bite his nails. Now, the exam asks, is that extinction? I would assume.
Yes.
And that's exactly where they try to catch you. It is not extinction. Putting gloves on Kyle is response blocking.
Wait, response blocking?
Yeah. To qualify as an extinction procedure, the individual must still have the opportunity to emit the behavior, but the behavior must meet zero reinforcement.
Oh, I see. Because Kyle's wearing thick gloves, the response is physically blocked from even occurring. He can't even try.
Exactly.
So how would you actually use extinction for something that feels good automatically? Like you can't withhold a physical sensation.
Well, you would have to remove the sensory payoff without blocking the action itself. So if the BCBA painted his nails with like a clear, foul-tasting polish.
Right. So Kyle could still physically bite his nails, but the resulting sensory input was no longer reinforcing. That aligns with the actual mechanics of extinction for an automatically maintained behavior.
Okay, so operant extinction always comes down to cutting off the consequence. But what about the respondent side of Lori?
The sweating and the heart rate.
Yeah. We successfully stopped her screaming by not letting her escape, but her heart is still racing and she's still sweating when she sees that yellow worksheet. You can't withhold a consequence from a racing heart because the heart is reacting to what happened before the antecedent.
And this requires a completely different mechanism, which is respondent extinction. The Cooper text translates the mechanics of this as a process of unpairing.
Unpairing?
Yes. Respondent extinction occurs when the conditioned stimulus is repeatedly presented without the unconditioned stimulus. Over time, it loses its power.
I'm going to need a real-world example of this unpairing process because repeatedly presenting a conditioned stimulus sounds very textbook.
Let's just use the classic pajamas analogy again. Let's say you transition to working from home. And because you're at home, you decide to wear your cozy flannel pajamas all day long.
Sounds like a dream.
Right. But historically, those pajamas have been heavily paired with sleep. Putting them on used to elicit a feeling of physical exhaustion.
So the pajamas are the conditioned stimulus.
Yes. But now, you're sitting at your kitchen island in those pajamas, writing stressful emails, taking difficult Zoom calls, dealing with intense spreadsheets. You are repeatedly presenting the conditioned stimulus, the pajamas, without the unconditioned stimulus of actually going to sleep.
And mechanically, what is happening in my brain when I do that?
Your nervous system is essentially an energy-saving machine. If it keeps firing off a biological sleep response every single time you put on the pajamas, but you're actively stressing over spreadsheets, the brain realizes it's wasting metabolic energy.
It's like, why am I sending sleep signals when we are stressed?
Exactly. It stops allocating resources to a biological alarm system that no longer predicts anything useful. It actively prunes that neural association. It's not just forgetting, it is an active biological unwiring. Eventually, the pajamas lose their power to elicit the sleep response.
Wow. Okay, so bringing that back to Lori, if we repeatedly present the yellow math worksheet, the conditioned stimulus, but we pair it with highly supportive, low-stress, successful learning environments, rather than the aversive failure she used to experience,
Her brain will eventually realize that the yellow paper no longer predicts a threat.
the nervous system prunes the association, and her heart rate stops spiking.
That is exactly how respondent extinction operates. You unpair the antecedent.
Okay, so if you are sitting in the exam trying to figure out if a scenario is operant or respondent extinction, the ultimate test is looking at what the practitioner is manipulating.
Right.
If they are manipulating the consequence by withholding a reinforcer, it's operant. If they're manipulating the antecedent by presenting a trigger over and over without its paired stimulus, it's respondent.
That is the perfect summary of domain B11.
But, let's be realistic about human behavior here. It is messy. If I stop letting Lori escape her math worksheet, she isn't just going to politely accept the new rules and start doing fractions.
Definitely not.
What actually happens when you cut off a consequence?
You get an extinction burst. When you implement extinction, you are essentially changing the laws of physics in the learner's universe. The learner's initial reaction is almost never to just give up.
Right.
Their initial reaction is to try harder. Think about a locked door.
Oh, I love this analogy from the sources. If I walk up to a door I use every single day and I push the handle, my history of reinforcement tells me that door is going to open.
Yeah.
If one day I push it and it doesn't open, I don't just say, oh, well, I guess this door doesn't work anymore and calmly walk away.
No, you don't.
I push it again. I push it 5 more times. I jiggle a handle. I pull it violently. I might even kick the bottom of the door. I escalate my behavior.
Mechanically, your brain is saying, this action must produce a result, so we need to increase the intensity. An extinction burst is that immediate, temporary increase in the frequency, rate, or intensity of the target behavior when an extinction procedure is first implemented.
The mock exams highlight this, right? With a practitioner named Maria.
Yes, Maria starts ignoring her client's attention-maintained whining. And immediately, the client's whining doesn't stop. It skyrockets into full-blown screaming.
And most people would think, oh, no, I ruined it.
Exactly. But that is a textbook extinction burst. It actually means your intervention is working. You found the right reinforcer, and you are successfully withholding it.
But you have to hold the line, because if Marie gives in and pays attention to the client when they escalate from whining to screaming.
She didn't just fail at extinction. She just taught the client that level 10 screaming is the new required baseline to get attention. She shaped a significantly worse behavior.
That is terrifying.
It is. And even if you do hold the line and the screaming gradually decreases down to 0, the process isn't over. You have to be prepared for spontaneous recovery.
I always picture spontaneous recovery as like a neural echo.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. Spontaneous recovery happens when a behavior that has been successfully extinguished suddenly reappears, even though absolutely no reinforcement has been provided.
The sources use the example of Devin, right?
Yes, Devin. So Devin used to ask the same repetitive questions on the car ride to school to get his mom's attention. The mom implemented extinction, withheld the attention, and the behavior dropped to 0. Things were completely fine for 2 solid weeks.
A total success.
Right. But then, out of nowhere on a Tuesday, Devin suddenly bombards his mom with the repetitive questions again.
And as a clinician, your first thought is usually the intervention failed. I identified the wrong function.
But mechanically, the brain is simply sending out a probe. It's testing the environment to ask, hey, did the rules change back? Spontaneous recovery is a natural part of the extinction process. It's a very short-lived echo, as long as the practitioner maintains the procedure.
So if the mom just continues to withhold reinforcement, that sudden burst of questions will fade away rapidly.
Exactly, just don't give in.
But what about when a behavior simply refuses to go away? We've all seen cases where extinction seems to take months and months.
That brings us to resistance to extinction. The culprit here is almost always the historical schedule of reinforcement. If a behavior was reinforced on a continuous schedule, meaning the learner got the payoff every single time they did the behavior, it will extinguish relatively quickly once you cut it off.
Right.
But if a behavior was maintained on an intermittent or variable schedule, it is highly resistant.
It's the slot machine effect. If I put $1 in a vending machine and nothing comes out, the continuous schedule is broken. I stop putting dollars in immediately.
Because you know it's broken.
Right. But a slot machine operates on a variable schedule. I know I'm not going to win every time. I might pull the lever 40 times with zero payout, but I keep pulling it because my reinforcement history tells me the payout is completely unpredictable. It could be the next pull.
Which is why, clinically, if a behavior is highly resistant to extinction, we might actually need to place it on a dense, continuous schedule of reinforcement before we implement extinction.
Oh, just to make the contrast clear to the brain.
Exactly. You make the loss of reinforcement obvious.
That is so smart. But, this brings up a really complex issue that ethics workbook dives into. We're talking about extinction bursts, screaming, kicking doors, unpredictable, spontaneous recovery. It is a messy, drawn-out, and often distressing process for everyone involved.
It definitely can be.
So why not just use punishment? I mean, a positive punishment procedure can suppress a behavior instantly without all this bursting and recovery.
That is a deeply important question. And the ethics of this are rooted in the hidden mechanics of punishment. The greatest danger of punishment isn't just the aversive experience for the client. The hidden danger is that punishment is incredibly, dangerously reinforcing for the practitioner.
Wait, really? Because the practitioner's stress goes away instantly.
Exactly. If a client is engaging in a severe problem behavior and the practitioner implements a punishment procedure, say a loud reprimand or a response cost, the problem behavior usually stops immediately. That immediate cessation of a stressful behavior is massive negative reinforcement for the practitioner.
It removes the aversive stimulus from their own environment.
Right. So the practitioner's behavior of using punishment gets reinforced. They become statistically more likely to use punishment again in the future, even for minor infractions, because their brain remembers how quickly it fixed their own discomfort.
It creates a dangerous cycle of overusing restrictive procedures. That makes so much sense.
Furthermore, punishment only tells the learner what not to do. It leaves a behavioral vacuum. Extinction is ethically superior, especially when it is combined with differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, or DRA.
Let's break down DRA mechanically. How does differential reinforcement physically change those behavioral pathways?
Think of a behavior as water flowing down a river. Extinction is building a dam. You're blocking the water from flowing down the old channel of screaming or throwing pencils.
Yeah.
But that energy still needs somewhere to go.
Right. The water has to flow.
Yes. So DRA is digging a brand new, highly efficient canal right next to the dam. You teach the client a functional communication response, like asking for a break. When they ask for a break, you immediately reinforce it.
You make the new canal wide, deep, and fast.
Exactly. The brain will always take the path of least resistance to the reinforcer.
So you aren't just suppressing the behavior, you are actively shifting the neural current. You're saying, this old pathway is blocked, but this new pathway will get you exactly what you need with half the effort.
Perfectly said.
That is such a vital perspective, not just for passing domain B11, but for actually changing lives in your clinical practice.
Before we go, consider this.
Yeah.
We've spent this time talking about extinction in the context of clinical behaviors or lab rats. But think about the algorithms governing your social media feeds.
Oh, no.
Tech companies use the exact mechanics of variable schedules of reinforcement to make your scrolling highly resistant to extinction. The physical pull you feel to refresh your feed one more time, even when the last 10 posts were totally boring.
The slot machine effect again.
Yes. That is an operant behavior, shaped by a billionaire's algorithm, utilizing resistance to extinction against your own nervous system. Extinction isn't just a clinical tool, it is the underlying code of how we interact with the entire world.
Wow. That is going to keep me up tonight. To you, our listener, keep crushing your exam prep. You have the tools to see this matrix now. We highly invite you to continue your BCBA study journey with the Behavioral Intelligence Study Series. It is just an incredible resource for diving deep into these exact kinds of task list concepts. For more resources, mock exams, and support, make sure to follow Amethyst Therapy Services. You can visit them online at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or reach out directly via email at info@amethysttherapyservices.com. Keep studying, keep analyzing the environment, and we will see you on the next deep dive.